Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about the Liat Show.
Okay.
Have you heard of this one?
I have, yeah. It's
It's a podcast and Substack created by Liat Portal.
okay.
And from what I've been able to gather, kind of going through her about page, some blog posts, and even just mentions on other podcasts,
Right.
it seems like Liat has this really unique way of like blending personal stories with these observations about Israeli culture and history and music, even science and entrepreneurship.
Right.
And she calls it weaving it all together and making it delicious. So that already has me intrigued. What do you think? What's so captivating about her approach?
Well, I think it's that delicious blend that really makes her stand out, you know?
Yeah.
Lee doesn't just share anecdotes. Like, she uses them as like a springboard to explore, some deeper cultural nuances.
Okay.
For example, she has this hilarious story about mishearing lyrics at a 30 Seconds to Mars concert.
Yep.
Yeah, she thought they were singing Marry Me instead of Bury Me.
Oh, wow.
Which, on the surface, it's just funny, right?
Right.
But then she goes on to connect this to her Moroccan-Israeli background.
Okay.
And explains how it didn't seem that odd to her, given the way that Moroccan men, like in her experience, can navigate like seemingly contradictory emotions.
Okay, so it's more than just a funny misunderstanding then.
Right.
She's using humor to open up a conversation about cultural differences
Exactly.
and how we perceive and interpret things.
Yeah.
Even something as simple as song lyrics.
Uh-huh.
Is that what she means when she describes herself as an architect, but not of buildings?
I think you're onto something there.
Okay.
It's like she's constructing a space where personal experiences become like windows
Right.
into this specific culture.
Yeah.
And she's very intentional about involving her audience in that process, too.
Okay.
She often says things like, you are not only the audience, you are an essential part of the story. But I'm curious to see how that actually plays out. Like, what are the building blocks, so to speak, of this interactive architecture she's creating?
Well, she releases episodes and sets over several days,
Okay.
which she describes as a live performance of writing.
Huh.
It definitely feels different from the typical podcast format.
Yeah.
It's almost like she's inviting you into her creative process as it unfolds.
That format is definitely unique.
Yeah.
Do you think it genuinely fosters a deeper connection with the audience?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay.
It's definitely intriguing,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering if it truly changes the way people engage with the content. She also talks about being the daughter of an architect
Yeah.
and how that influenced her. So maybe it's tied to that.
It's possible.
Yeah?
And this brings us to a crucial question. What does it even mean to build something less tangible,
Right.
as she puts it?
Yeah.
If we're talking about architecture,
Yeah.
there needs to be some kind of structure, right?
Yeah.
What are the foundational elements of this new kind of architecture she's referring to? Is it the stories themselves,
Yeah.
the format, the audience interaction?
She actually asks for help with defining it.
Really?
Yeah. It's almost like she's acknowledging that she's still figuring it out,
Okay.
still experimenting. She even says, help me find the words to describe what I do, which I find really interesting.
Interesting.
What do you make of that?
Well, it definitely suggests a willingness to be vulnerable, to acknowledge that even someone as, articulate and insightful as Liat Portal might not have all the answers.
Yeah.
And it seems like she sees her audience as collaborators in this ongoing exploration of storytelling and cultural understanding.
Now, speaking of her audience, it's interesting to see how other podcasters have reacted to her work.
Oh, okay.
We have mentions from Benjamin and Rachel and Mark and Samantha.
Okay.
It seems like her stories are sparking some interesting conversations.
It's fascinating to see how her experiences resonate differently with different people.
Yeah.
Like, Benjamin and Rachel seem to focus on the humor, while Mark and Samantha seem to delve deeper into the cultural implications.
Which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
It shows that the Liat Show isn't just entertainment.
Right.
It's actually prompting people to think critically about cultural differences and how those differences shape our understanding of the world.
Yeah.
And she does it all with this captivating blend of personal anecdotes, humor, and thought-provoking observations.
Definitely.
I'm excited to keep digging into this one.
Me too. So picking up where we left off,
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating how Liat manages to weave in such a wide range of topics, like history, music, science, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
It's not just about Israeli culture.
Right.
It's about the human experience as a whole.
You know what's really cool?
What's that?
It seems like she actually uses those different topics as tools to dissect cultural differences.
Right.
For instance,
Yeah.
she connects her father's architectural background
Right.
to the concept of building something less tangible, which we were just discussing.
Yeah.
Could be her show, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then she throws in a personal anecdote about mishearing song lyrics. And suddenly we're talking about how cultural backgrounds can shape our perception of art.
Right.
It's like she's creating this multi-dimensional puzzle where each piece reveals a new layer of insight.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's not a linear narrative.
Right.
It's more like she's creating a web of like interconnected ideas.
Yeah.
And the audience is invited to trace those connections and make their own discoveries.
Right. And I think that's where the live performance aspect of her writing comes in. Releasing episodes in sets over several days could be a way to mimic that feeling of exploration, of following a train of thought as it unfolds.
Right.
It's like she's saying, come along with me on this journey and let's see where it takes us.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that format also make it challenging to maintain a cohesive narrative?
That's a good question.
Like, how do you ensure that each episode, even though released separately, contributes to a larger, meaningful whole?
That's a great question. And honestly, I'm not sure if she's always successful.
Okay.
Sometimes it feels like the connections are a bit tenuous.
Right.
Like she's jumping between ideas without fully fleshing them out.
Yeah.
But other times it's like she's hitting a nerve, revealing a profound insight that makes you see the world differently.
I can see how that inconsistency might be frustrating for some listeners.
Yeah.
But perhaps that's part of the risk she's taking, you know?
Right.
By experimenting with this unconventional format. It's not polished and predictable.
Right.
It's raw and unpredictable.
Yeah.
Which can be both exciting and frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. And that unpredictability might actually be a strength.
Oh, okay.
Especially in today's digital landscape, where everything feels so curated and polished.
Right.
It's like she's offering a glimpse behind the curtain, you know, showing you the messy, nonlinear process of creative thinking.
To go back to her statement about Arab culture being behind Western culture, it seems like she's trying to provoke a reaction, to challenge assumptions, and spark a conversation. Do you think she's doing it effectively?
I think it's a tricky line to walk. On the one hand, it's brave of her to put such a potentially controversial statement out there.
Right.
But on the other hand, it could easily be misconstrued as insensitive or even offensive.
Right.
It depends a lot on the context and how she frames the discussion. I wonder what kind of feedback she's gotten on that statement.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
If she's truly aiming for dialogue and understanding, she needs to be receptive to feedback.
Yeah.
Even if it's critical.
Yeah.
Has she addressed this in any of her subsequent episodes or posts?
Unfortunately, the source material we have doesn't delve into the aftermath of that statement.
Right.
So we're left to speculate on how it was received and whether it led to the kind of constructive conversations she intended.
Which is a shame, because it would be interesting to see how she handles criticism and whether she's able to incorporate different perspectives into her narrative.
And that circles back to the whole question of audience involvement.
Right.
It's not enough to just say you're part of the story. You have to actually demonstrate how you're incorporating that feedback, how you're allowing the audience to shape the direction of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's truly a collaborative process, as she suggests, then the audience needs to feel like their voices are being heard.
Right.
That their perspectives are being valued.
Yeah.
Even if they challenge her own.
So the question remains, does the Liat show live up to its promise of being a new kind of architecture for storytelling?
Right.
Does it genuinely foster a deeper connection with the audience? Or is it more about style than substance?
Perhaps the answer isn't black and white. Maybe it's both.
Yeah.
It's clearly a work in progress, a constantly evolving experiment.
Right.
And while it might not always hit the mark,
Yeah.
it's definitely pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the realm of digital storytelling.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect model,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a fascinating case study
Right.
in how to blend personal narrative with cultural exploration
Uh-huh.
in a way that's both engaging and thought-provoking.
And it's definitely generating buzz.
Right.
I mean, even established radio personalities like Mark and Samantha
Right.
are discussing her work on their shows.
Yeah.
Clearly, she's tapped into something that resonates with a wider audience.
Speaking of reaching a wider audience,
Yeah.
I know she's very active on Substack and social media.
Mm-hmm.
She even mentions that her content is free.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is that a strategic choice, do you think?
It could be.
Okay.
By making her content accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
She's removing barriers to entry
Uh-huh.
and potentially reaching a much larger audience.
Right. And it aligns with her emphasis on audience involvement.
Right.
It's like she's saying, here's my work, come engage with it, be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's also a way to circumvent the traditional gatekeepers of media.
Yeah.
You know, she's building her own platform,
Right.
her own community, where she can share her ideas directly with her audience without having to go through intermediaries.
Which is incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
Especially for someone who's trying to create something new and different.
Right.
Something that might not fit neatly into existing categories.
Exactly.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into the Lost Show,
I'm struck by how she manages to tackle, like, potentially sensitive cultural topics
right?
with this blend of humor and honesty.
Yeah.
Like her statement about Arab culture being behind Western culture,
That's bold, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And while it might be controversial,
Yeah.
I think it's important to consider the context.
Right.
You know, she's not making a blanket judgment,
Right.
but rather drawing from her own experiences
Yeah.
and observations. She specifically mentions issues like the treatment of women and honor killings
Right.
as examples of cultural differences that she finds troubling.
Right. And she doesn't shy away from acknowledging the complexities either.
Right.
She even points out that within Arab culture,
Yeah.
there are vast differences between, say, Moroccan and Iraqi societies. So it's not about painting an entire culture with a broad brush,
Right.
but rather highlighting specific areas where values might clash.
Exactly. And that's where her personal storytelling becomes so crucial.
Yeah. Because she's willing to share her own struggles and vulnerabilities, she creates a space where it's okay to have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
You know, to question assumptions and to acknowledge that even within our own cultures, there are contradictions and inconsistencies.
That makes me think about her anecdote about Moroccan men holding seemingly contradictory emotions.
Right.
By sharing that personal observation.
Yeah.
She's not only making a point about cultural differences,
Right.
she's also inviting the listener to consider
Yeah.
how their own cultural background might shape their perceptions and behaviors.
I think that's one of the most valuable aspects of the Liat show.
Yeah.
It's not just about learning about Israeli culture.
Right.
It's about developing a deeper awareness of our own cultural biases
Yeah.
and how they influence the way we interact with the world.
And she does it all in a way that's so engaging.
Right.
She's funny, she's insightful,
Yeah.
and she's not afraid to be vulnerable. It's like you're having a conversation with a friend.
Yeah.
A really smart, funny friend
Uh-huh.
who's constantly challenging your thinking
Right.
and pushing you to see things from a new perspective.
It's that conversational tone
Yeah.
that makes her work so accessible, even when she's tackling complex issues.
Right.
She doesn't lecture or preach.
Right.
She invites you into her world. And through her stories, you start to see the world differently.
So what do you think is the lasting impact of the Liat show? What does she leave the listener with?
I think she leaves the listener with a sense of curiosity,
Okay.
a desire to learn more,
Yeah.
to dig deeper, to question assumptions, and to engage in meaningful conversations about cultural differences.
Right.
She shows us that it's okay to be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
to not have all the answers, and to embrace the messiness
Right.
of cross-cultural dialogue.
I couldn't agree more. And for anyone who wants to embark on that journey of cultural exploration and self-discovery, I highly recommend checking out the Liat show.
Yeah, definitely.
You can find her on Substack and YouTube.
Great.
Her content is free, and it's a truly unique and enriching experience.
And if you're inspired by what you hear, consider supporting her work by subscribing to her Substack
Right.
or sharing her content with others.
Yeah.
Because in a world that often feels divided,
Yeah.
voices like Liat's are more important than ever.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into The Liat Show.
Okay.
We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of culture,
Yeah.
storytelling, and the power of personal experience.
Definitely.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Yeah.